Hello, welcome to the sideboard here at the Star City Games Team Open in Pittsburgh, part of the SCG Tour, brought to you by Okie Dokie Dice and Carnox Chairs. I'm Nick Miller alongside Invitational Champion Brian Coval. How you doing?
Pretty good.
You're bringing to the table Urza in the form of Grixis. And
yes.
Urza is one of the big highlights from Modern Horizons, one of the cards that people looked at immediately and said, this is going to do some things.
Yes.
This was also one of the few other decks other than the Hogak deck that really got a lot of attention coming out of Modern Horizons. Your team 8-1, you're piloting this deck. How does it feel?
This deck has felt incredible. Like you said, we're 8-1. Like everything that we remember about KCI, like the dreaded KCI, I played that deck the entire time it was legal, and I did very well with it. And this deck, in a lot of ways, feels better. As messed up as that is, your fair plan is very real. Like KCI, a non-zero number of games ended with scrap trawler beats, and then like you board into Psy, and that happens. But like mostly you did have to combo. But here you could just play an Urza Lord High Artificer, who makes a 6/6, and then starts casting spells for free while you beat down with your 6/6. And all the while they have to deal with that while you're threatening your Thopter Sword combo, where they could just die.
Right, we even saw Dominic Harvey play a KCI deck with the Thopter Sword engine already in the deck.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that it would just port over here as well.
Yep.
And
right
you
in.
said this deck can actually function smoother and more deterministically than KCI used to.
Yes, KCI, there was always that period where you start sacking artifacts, drawing cards, gaining a little mana, like, is my mana gonna get high enough? Am I gonna keep my cards flowing? And then like, eventually you hit the point where you're like, okay, I'm good. Urza is good. Like, you're already at the point where you're like, I'm good when Urza arrives. As the way this works is that Thopter Foundry, you sacrifice an artifact to make a 1/1. Sword of the Meek is an artifact that when a 1/1 comes into play, it jumps back from your graveyard into play equipped to that 1/1. Urza also allows you to tap artifacts for blue. And that ability is on Urza, that's important. Urza has the text, tap an untapped artifact you control, add blue. It doesn't give that ability to the artifact, so you don't have to worry about summoning sickness. So Urza lets you tap Sword of the Meek to sacrifice Sword of the Meek, and then Sword of the Meek comes back, and you end up 1 life, up 1 creature. And you have an untapped additional artifact in play, the Thopter. So you also end up 1 mana. So you have infinite life, mana, and creatures. But Urza has more text, don't worry. For 5 mana, you can shuffle your deck and cast the top card. Or more specifically, exile the top card and you can cast it till end of turn. So once you have infinite mana, you can cast your whole deck. And where do we go from there? There is 1 scrap trawler in the deck. Remember this guy from KCI. And his good friend, Pyrite Spellbomb. So
I'm having flashbacks.
yeah, if you're not scared yet, you should be. So Sword of the Meek, turns out, remember it's an artifact, it also costs 2, which is more than 1, and it's also more than 0. So once you have infinite mana and you can sacrifice your artifacts infinitely, you can also deal infinite damage. So they just die. When Urza arrives, the game is over.
What's better than infinite mana, infinite life, infinite creatures, and infinite damage?
There isn't anything better because the game is over.
I like it.
Yeah, it's hard to get anything better.
So we went over all of the Urza stuff. It's also notable, we have another Modern Horizons All-Star here hanging out, Goblin Engineer.
Yep, 4 of that one.
And what all is that doing?
All right, so Entomb is a legacy staple that's not legal in Modern. And this card Entomb's an artifact. You search your deck for an artifact, put it straight into the graveyard, which, as it turns out, that's where you want this card. Sword of the Meek just belongs in your graveyard. Just goes right there. So you just need, there's 1 sword in the deck, 4 Thopters, or 4 Foundries. So you can just Entomb your sword, play a Foundry, and then you're off to the races. And that's the first one. The second one, if you already have one in play, for a red, 1 red and tap this, sacrifice an artifact, you can return an artifact that costs 3 or less from your graveyard to play. So if you have one in play already without summoning sickness, and you play a second one, it's literally Tinker. If you put an artifact from your deck into the graveyard, and then the first one that isn't summoning sick pays 1 red and it comes straight into play. Just Tinker. That card is restricted in Vintage. And we got 4 of them in this deck.
But we're not putting Blightsteel into play in this deck.
No, we have something better. We have Thopter Sword.
Other cards, we also have the Arkham's Astrolabe, because for some reason we needed more 1-mana draw card artifacts.
Right.
That's just going to be juicing the wheels.
Yeah, this deck with 4 Serum Visions, 4 Astrolabe, and 4 Mishra's Bauble, just like KCI with the spheres and the stars, like your opening 7 is probably like 10 to 12 cards realistically. By the time you're done churning through them, your hand's going to look totally different. And Astrolabe turns on Mox Opal, which is what always on the watch list for the modern ban
Always
list.
the problem when an artifact deck happens.
Right, yes. Always arguably the problem. And Astrolabe also fixes your mana, which is really important because there are 7 basic lands in the deck and 5 of them are islands. So being able to use your 2 islands to cast Goblin Engineer on 2 is pretty important. My round 1 today, I punted because I tapped my Astrolabes for blue with Urza instead of being able to leave up red for Engineer. And this Astrolabe, I just undervalued it because it was round 1. Right. I didn't know any better. I'm sorry, Astrolabe. I love you.
You've got some reps now, not making that mistake
anymore. Yeah, we're not
anymore.
doing that again.
Other things going on in this deck, because that's not enough. We've got Whir still going on, so you have a Whir package and your Goblin Engineer package here that you already mentioned. You have the Spell Bomb. We also have some other tools hanging out here. You know, Hogak's a deck, so you've got your Graveyard Hate with Tormod's Crypt and Spell Bomb.
And there's a Cage over here too.
Got Cage, you also have Ensnaring Bridge, you got Pithing Needle, so you have your whole package there to hate on all these unfair decks.
Yep.
And you said you're 3-0 against Hogak this tournament.
Yes, I have not lost a game to Hogak in this tournament.
That's a good spot to be.
It's 3-0-6-0 against that deck.
Anything else we're missing in the main deck before we move to the sideboard, because that's a lot?
The one thing we haven't talked about yet is this one Ichor Wellspring. We keep reminiscing with KCI, and if you're in a grindier game against maybe blue-white or something that's not killing you immediately, you can engineer this into your graveyard, sacrifice an artifact, you draw a card when this comes in, on following turns you sack this to draw a card, and get another artifact back. And the artifact that you're most likely to have early in the game is Astrolabe, which also draws a card when it comes into play. So it becomes pay 1 red, draw 2 in a grindy mid-game that's come up a few times.
I would play that card.
Yeah, that card's pretty good.
Sideboard, even more Hogak hate and more just in general graveyard hate.
Yes.
4 Leyline, 2 Surgical.
Yep.
Everyone knows what those cards do. Outside of that, we have 2 Sai and 2 Tezzeret. This must be your kind of alternate win con, extra pressure stuff.
Yeah, basically every single matchup, because of Hogak, everyone is good at fighting the graveyard, and Thopter Sword does interact with the go through the graveyard to get there. You can play around Surgical pretty easily, or like Scavenging Ooze or something like that, but like a Rest in Peace or Leyline, you just can't combo through it. So you have 2 Sai, 2 Tezzeret that can win the game on their own without using the graveyard.
Removal spells, some Shrapnel Blasts, some Fatal Pushes, and we got a new one, Dead of Winter, so you got a bunch of Snowlands.
Yeah, Dead of Winter. There are the 7 Snowlands I talked about, plus the 4 Astrolabes. They are snow permanents. So Dead of Winter is usually good for 4 on turn 3. That clears out any human that could possibly arrive at that point.
All right, I gotta imagine you're pretty happy with the deck. What do you expect going into day 2?
I'm hoping for a lot of Hogak, honestly, because this deck eats that right up, and I like the matchup. I don't want to play against, I had a camera match against Mono Red Phoenix that just crushed.
Sure.
In game 3, I drew 2 spells all game, which didn't help, but that matchup's bad. Like Burn, Mono Red Phoenix, Infect's probably bad.
Right.
Like those, like super linear.
The usual KCI.
Decks. Yes, the KCI Slayers, yeah. Yep.
All right, well, it might be back. We've mentioned it a lot. It looks scary. The people who are playing it are doing pretty well. You're off to a great start. We're going to be seeing you in day 2.
Yep.
Thanks for joining me here in the sideboard. Stay tuned to Star City Games all weekend long for action here in Pittsburgh.